The planes didn't sleep that night. They lay awake under a stretched sky, restless as a held breath, dust shifting in low spirals across the hard-packed earth. Fence posts creaked softly in the wind. Somewhere far off, a coyote called, its cry thin and lonely, then swallowed by distance. The moon hung pale and watchful, lighting the ruts of the wagon road like scars that refused to fade. Tomorrow, the marriage would be set. Everyone in the territory knew it. They talked about it in low voices at the general store, over coffee gone cold, over cards and whiskey and unfinished prayers. An arranged union, a land deal dressed up as vows, a woman traded to settle a debt between men who called themselves respectable because they owned property and carried Bibles on Sunday. Her name was Eliza Monroe. She stood at the edge of the ranch now, wrapped in a shawl that did little to keep the cold from biting through her bones. The big house behind her was dark, except for one window upstairs, where her aunt slept, if sleep would come at all. Eliza doubted it. Tomorrow was important. Tomorrow would change everything. She pressed her hand to her mouth as the sob broke free. She hadn't planned to cry. Tears were useless things out here, same as mercy. But they came anyway, hot and shaking, sliding down her cheeks as she stared out at the open land. The plains stretched endlessly, indifferent and cruel, the same way they had been the day her parents were buried beneath a sky just as wide. She had said yes because there was no one left to say no for her. The man she was to marry, Caleb Harlan, owned half the valley, and the other half feared him. He was twice her age, heavy in the shoulders, with eyes that never softened, no matter how politely he smiled. He had shaken her hand when the agreement was made, like sealing a cattle sale. His grip had lingered just long enough to remind her that resistance would be pointless. Tomorrow, she would belong to him. A sound behind her made her stiffen. Hooves? Slow, measured, familiar. She wiped her face quickly, but it was too late. The rider had already seen her. The horse stepped into the moonlight first, a tall bay with a white blaze down its nose, steam puffing gently from its nostrils. Then the man astride it, broad-shouldered, dust-caked, hat pulled low. He sat like he belonged there, like the saddle and the land had shaped him the same way. Ethan Cole, cowboy, drifter, ranch hand when work was honest enough. Trouble when men lied to themselves. He swung down from the saddle without a word, boots crunching softly on gravel. His face was lined by sun and wind, a jaw set by too many nights sleeping under open skies. He hadn't shaved in days. His eyes, dark and steady, took everything in without rushing, including her tears. "I didn't mean to," Eliza started, then stopped. The lie tasted bitter. "You shouldn't be here." Ethan leaned against the fence, arms resting easy, like a man who knew when to speak and when to wait. Your aunt asked me to bring back the South mare," he said. His voice was low, roughened by dust and silence. "Saw the light. Thought I'd check." She turned away, ashamed of the weakness he'd witnessed. "I'm fine." "That so?" The wind lifted her shawl, snapping it gently against her back. She hugged herself tighter. "You don't need to concern yourself with me." Ethan studied her a long moment. Then quietly he said, "Tomorrow's the wedding." Her shoulders tensed. "That's what they're calling it," she replied. Something dark flickered in his expression. "You don't sound like a woman counting down the hours." She laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Do women like me get to count anything?" Ethan pushed off the fence and took a step closer, not invading her space, just close enough that she could feel the heat of another living soul beside her. "You don't have to go." The words hit harder than a slap. She turned, staring at him as if he'd spoken madness aloud. "You shouldn't say things like that." "I mean it." "You don't understand." Her voice trembled now, anger and fear twisting together. "There's land involved, money, promises already made. My aunt's ranch survives because of this. If I walk away—" "Men like Harlan don't forgive debts," Ethan finished. She swallowed. "Exactly." Silence settled between them, thick and heavy. Somewhere, a gate creaked open and shut in the wind. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I've seen what happens to women who marry men like him." Her eyes searched his face. And I've buried the ones who didn't survive it." The truth of that settled deep in her chest, colder than the night air. She looked back out over the plains. imagining herself trapped behind Harlan's walls, her voice swallowed by his name. "What choice do I have?" she whispered. Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked past her, toward the darkness where the road vanished into nothing. The same road he'd ridden in on, the same one he could ride out on before dawn. "Choice always has a price," he said finally. "Question is who pays it." Before she could respond, a second sound reached them, more hooves, faster, heavier. Ethan's posture changed instantly. He straightened, one hand drifting near his hip. "We're not alone." 3 riders emerged from the dark, silhouettes first, then faces. Ranch hands wearing Harlan's brand. Their horses were fresh. Their eyes weren't. "Well now," one of them called, spitting into the dirt. "Boss said we might find you sniffing around here, Cole." Ethan stepped subtly in front of Eliza. "Didn't know I needed permission to return a horse." The man grinned, mean and thin. "Boss don't like surprises, especially tonight." Eliza felt her heart hammer against her ribs. Tomorrow loomed closer with every breath. The rider's gaze slid to her, lingering. "Bride shouldn't be wandering so late." Ethan's voice dropped. "You can turn around and ride back the way you came." The man laughed. "Or what?" For a moment the plains held their breath. Ethan met Eliza's eyes over his shoulder. There was no panic there, only resolve, sharp as drawn steel. "You still think you don't have a choice?" he murmured. The wind howled across the open land, carrying dust, danger, and the promise that nothing would ever be the same again. Morning didn't come gentle. It tore across the plains in a hard line of pale gold, burning away the last shadows, like lies that couldn't survive daylight. Frost clung to the grass. Dust settled on everything, boots, fence rails, the quiet fear hanging over the ranch like a coming storm. Eliza hadn't slept. She stood at the wash basin in her room, staring at a face she barely recognized. Her eyes were rimmed red. Her hands shook as she splashed water against her cheeks. Outside, the ranch was already alive, horses being saddled, men talking too loudly, laughter forced and hollow. A wedding day. Downstairs, her aunt moved like a woman already in mourning. "You must eat," Aunt Margaret said, setting a plate down that Eliza didn't touch. "People will be watching." "They always are," Eliza replied softly. Margaret's hands paused. For a moment, her hard expression cracked. "This is the way things are done." Eliza finally looked at her. "Is it?" Margaret didn't answer. Outside, a horse snorted, a familiar one. Eliza's heart tightened. She stepped onto the porch and saw Ethan Cole tightening a cinch strap. His movements calm, deliberate. He hadn't left. That alone felt like rebellion. Their eyes met. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. But before either could move, the sound of wagons rolled in like thunder. Caleb Harlan had arrived. He came with men, always men. Riders flanked him, rifles slung casual but ready. His black coat was clean, his boots polished, violence dressed as civilization. He dismounted slowly, smiling as if today were a celebration. "Eliza," he said warmly, "you look appropriate." Her jaw clenched. Ethan straightened, stepping forward. "She ain't livestock." Harlan's smile didn't waver, but his eyes sharpened. "Didn't know I invited commentary." "You didn't," Ethan said. "But here it is." The ranch went quiet. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Harlan took a step closer, studying Ethan like a problem he intended to solve permanently. "I've heard about you. A man who doesn't stay anywhere long enough to matter." Ethan didn't blink. "And I've heard about you. A man who buys what he can't earn." That was enough. Harlan's hand snapped out, fast, brutal, striking Eliza across the face. The sound echoed. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Ethan did. He crossed the space in 2 strides and drove Harlan backward, slamming him into a post. A gun came up. Another followed. Horses screamed. "Stop!" Eliza cried. Ethan froze, not because of the rifles, but because of her voice. Blood ran from Harlan's lip. He wiped it slowly, eyes burning. "You just signed your death warrant." Ethan stepped back, hands open. "Touch her again, and it won't matter how many men you brought." Harlan laughed, a cold, promising sound. "This marriage happens today, one way or another." By noon, the deal turned ugly. Harlan's men rode out, not to leave, but to surround the ranch. Supply wagons were stopped. Neighbors turned away, fear winning over decency. The message was clear. Obey or starve. Eliza stood in the barn later, fingers buried in a horse's mane, breathing in hay and sweat to keep from breaking. Ethan stood nearby, sharpening a knife on stone. "You should go," she said. "This isn't your fight." He didn't look up. "It became my fight when he hit you." Her voice dropped. "He'll kill you." Ethan finally met her gaze. "Maybe." Silence stretched. Then quieter he added, "But if I ride away now, I'll be dead already." She swallowed hard. "If I go through with it, no one gets hurt." "That's a lie men like him sell," Ethan said. "And it costs lives." Outside, gunfire cracked, warning shots. The clock was running out. By dusk, Harlan delivered his final terms. The wedding would proceed at sundown, or the ranch would burn. Eliza stood between two futures, one that would cage her, and one that might kill them both. She turned to Ethan, fear and resolve colliding in her chest. "If we run," she whispered, "there's no going back." Ethan saddled his horse. "I never go back." She climbed up behind him, hands gripping his coat as riders began to shout. The gates burst open. Gunshots split the air, and the plains swallowed them whole. If this chapter pulled you in, don't forget to like the video, comment whether Eliza made the right choice, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.